They sold my childhood home, threw my name off the trust, and used my inheritance to fund my brother's luxury wedding, then told me I was never really part of the family. Hi, I'm Julia. I was the so-called disappointment they quietly erased before the big celebration. But what they didn't know? I'd spent years rebuilding, quietly, carefully, and when I returned, I didn't come for revenge. I came with ownership papers, and I turned their legacy upside down. You won't believe what happened when I walked into that auction tent and what I did with the house they thought they stole for good. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. I hadn't been back to Maple Glen in over 15 years, not since the wedding, not since the voicemail. But that morning, I found myself stepping out of my car a few blocks down, smoothing the collar of my black coat like it might shield me from old memories. The air smelled like cinnamon and smoke. Fall in Asheville always carried that mix of comfort and quiet decay. I walked slowly, heels tapping against the sidewalk. The trees lining Crescent Street had turned, spilling red and gold across the curb like confetti after a parade. The house was up ahead. My old house, though it hardly looked like it belonged to me anymore. The porch swing was gone. My father hung it when I was 8. He'd used real rope, thick and scratchy, and tied it with the kind of precision that made him proud. Now that spot held a string of fairy lights, too polished, too curated, like someone had tried to dress up a memory to make it forgettable. White canopies stretched across the yard, a few folding chairs, floral centerpieces that looked expensive but hollow, the kind of decor meant to suggest tasteful celebration, though no one could quite name what was being celebrated. I didn't need a seat. I wasn't here to mingle. People were already murmuring, holding paper coffee cups and glancing between the auctioneer's clipboard and their phones. Some of the older neighbors whispered behind their sleeves. I recognized the shape of their curiosity before I recognized their faces. Catherine stood near the hedge line. My mother had always known how to look expensive without trying. Her blazer was cream-colored and fitted, pearls at her neck, mimosa in hand. She laughed too loudly at something Andrew said, tilting her head back with a flair that felt rehearsed. And there he was, Andrew, sleeves rolled, sunglasses perched, trying so hard to look casual while still absorbing every camera angle like it was a boardroom pitch. Kendra stood beside him, wrapped in an oversized wool shawl and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned toward Catherine, whispered something, then looked directly at me. Andrew noticed the shift. He turned, scanned, and when his gaze landed on me, he smiled like we were old high school classmates bumping into each other at a gas station. He lifted a hand in a lazy wave. I didn't wave back. I kept walking, slow and steady, the kind of pace that made people look twice. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniably present. My boots clicked on the pavement and I walked close enough to the white tent for them to feel it, the weight of the silence they had written me into. Someone in the crowd asked, too loudly, "Is that her?" Another voice. Julia Monroe, I think. Didn't I what? Get erased? The auctioneer cleared his throat, shuffling his papers. I stopped near the mailbox. Same spot I stood the day Catherine told me there wasn't room at the wedding. Same place I had once waited for the school bus in the cold, chewing on the end of my sleeve. A young couple stood near the edge of the crowd. The woman pointed up at the second-story window with gentle excitement. My old bedroom. I wondered if she'd noticed the skylight, if the lavender soap I used to press into the sill had ever left its scent behind. Probably not. Memory fades faster for those who didn't live in it. Then I saw Catherine's eyes lock onto mine. Her smile didn't fall immediately. It flickered. Her grip on the mimosa tightened, the glass paused mid-air, and for the first time in years, I saw something that looked like hesitation cross her face. Andrew followed her gaze, his smirk faltering just a little. I stood still. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to wave deeds in their faces. Yet, my presence was the opening line. Just being here, on this lawn, where they thought they'd buried my history with landscaping and lies, was enough. They thought they had written me out of the story. But ghosts don't vanish, especially not the ones who hold the deed. Some goodbyes are loud. Mine wasn't. Mine came with a voicemail and the soft click of a door I didn't realize had closed until I was already standing outside, keys in hand, wondering where to go. Summer 2005. I was 19. The wedding was Andrew's. Big, backyard. Imported flowers and custom cocktails. I was supposed to read a poem. Nothing dramatic. Just something I'd written in college. The day before, Catherine called. "Julia," she said, voice tight and clipped. "We think it's better if you sit this one out. Andrew needs the spotlight." I stood there on the porch, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the navy dress I had ironed and folded neatly in the hall closet. My heels were already in the car. 2 days later, the voicemail came. "We needed the money. You never really fit in anyway." 6 seconds. That's all it took to turn $187,000 into a pool, orchids, and a wedding tent with silk bows. My trust fund, left by my grandmother, gone, and I hadn't even been given a plate of cake. The Civic smelled like old fries and shame. I parked behind the public library, windows fogged up with my breath. For 2 weeks, that car was home. I used the heater to dry my hair, canned tuna to stay full, and my dad's old jacket to stay warm. No one knew. I didn't tell friends. Pride's a strange thing. It'll keep you from begging while you freeze behind a dumpster. At night, I walked into the 24-hour print shop where I'd landed a graveyard shift. I changed ink cartridges, loaded trays, collated reports for real estate firms I'd never afford to hire. The fluorescent lights hummed like they were mocking me. Then one evening, I found it. A scholarship flyer taped to the mirror in the staff bathroom. Crinkled corners. Deadline 3 days. I took a photo with my half-cracked flip phone. That night, I typed the application essay with blistered thumbs, balancing my phone against the steering wheel, the dome light flickering overhead. I started with this: "I have nothing left to lose, and that may be my greatest asset." Somehow, it worked. By 25, I was managing mid-tier branding accounts. By 30, I had a team of 4. We built campaigns for local nonprofits, redevelopment projects, and startups. I learned the language of permits and property. I learned how people like Catherine used words like revitalize to mean remove. At 38, I bought my first house on Maple Glen. Not the old one, not yet, but a rental 3 doors down, then a duplex across the street. Quietly, under LLCs and silent bids. No press, no signposts, just paper and timing. Most nights I drove the neighborhood without stopping. Sometimes I'd slow near the house. The porch light was always too bright, too cold. Not like it used to be. Nothing ever was. Then one night, late in October, I walked past the church at the corner, the one with the boarded-up windows and rusted gate. I had just finalized its purchase a week prior. No one knew. No one had to. Until my phone rang, the screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years, Miss Darlene. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice cracked on the second word. "Julia. I'm sorry to call, but they're talking about rezoning again. Catherine and Andrew, they want to change the whole street. I don't know where I'd go." Outside my window, the porch swing creaked in the wind. I didn't speak right away, just looked out at the house that used to be mine and whispered silently to myself, "They never really stop, do they?" They thought I'd vanish. They assumed I'd fade into the footnotes, some failed daughter with a liberal arts degree and too much pride. But I didn't disappear. I became the fine print they never read, the clauses, the bylaws, the deeds tucked quietly beneath their assumptions. Early winter in Asheville carries a kind of hush. Frost gathers on windows like soft warnings. My home office sat still in the quiet, lit by a single lamp and the faint hum of the radiator. On the desk, manila folders were arranged in neat rows, property maps, HOA meeting minutes, zoning petitions. I flipped through the latest one. Maple Glen Redevelopment Initiative, filed by Catherine Monroe and Andrew Monroe on November 12th. Their signatures were looped and smug, like they'd already made the decision. Rezoning to allow mixed-use construction. Language dressed in phrases like community enhancement and economic vibrancy. I knew what it meant. Eviction notices for retirees and rent hikes no one asked for. But they had miscalculated. My LLC Oak Haven Holdings held title to 7 properties on Crescent Avenue. Quiet purchases, each one made with precision and patience. I had enough stake to stop it all. I stared at the petition again, lips tightening. Then I pulled out a binder and began cross-referencing. It wasn't just about Catherine and Andrew anymore. It hadn't been for years. Later that afternoon, I drove over to Miss Darlene's house. She still lived in the same ranch-style home with blue shutters and a mailbox that leaned slightly to the left. Her porch smelled like cloves and dried oranges. She opened the door before I could knock. "You're here," she said, her voice warm but weary. The living room was exactly as I remembered. Quilted couch, cinnamon candles, a photo of her late husband in uniform. She handed me a teacup with a floral rim, the kind you can't buy in stores anymore. "They're trying to make it seem like a kindness," she said, settling into her chair, "calling it a revitalization. But you know what that means for people like us." I nodded, taking a sip. The tea was strong, slightly sweet. "I've had 6 neighbors stop by this week," she went on, all scared, all confused. One woman cried, said she'd lived here since '82 and now they're saying she'll need to move or pay triple in taxes. I told her you might help. She reached into a woven basket and pulled out a handful of folded papers, petitions, letters, some in shaky handwriting, notes from people who had no lawyers, just memories and porches full of potted plants. I set my cup down. "They're counting on no one noticing," I said, "on silence, on exhaustion." Darlene looked at me for a long moment. "But you noticed." I nodded. That night, I returned to my desk. The house was quiet. Outside, snow had started to dust the street lamps. I turned on a second lamp, pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the printer, and began drafting a formal notice to the HOA. It read, "As the current majority stakeholder in Crescent Avenue properties, I am requesting to address the board in the upcoming zoning review session." When I signed the bottom, my pen barely trembled. "This isn't revenge," I whispered into the stillness. "It's protection." I slipped the document into a slate gray folder, clipped it shut, and set it aside. Outside my window, the snow was falling heavier now, the kind that makes the world go quiet just before something shifts. "They're not ready for me," I thought as I reached to turn off the light. "But I've been ready for years." They expected shouting, some messy burst of anger they could dismiss as bitter and emotional. But I didn't come to shout. I came with paperwork and a folder full of receipts they never saw coming. Maple Glen Community Hall still smelled like overbrewed coffee and dusted carpet cleaner. The siding outside peeled at the edges, and the welcome sign hadn't been updated in over a decade. But to the neighborhood, this building was sacred. It held birthdays and retirement parties, baby showers, and farewell potlucks. Tonight, it held something else. Power. The chairs were already filling when I arrived. I chose not to make a scene, just walked in and took a seat near the back, my folder tucked under one arm. A few heads turned. Some of the older residents squinted, trying to place me. I heard my name whispered once, Julia Monroe, but no one said it out loud. At the front of the room stood Catherine, flanked by Andrew, both facing the board like polished realtors about to pitch a 6-bedroom flip. Catherine wore her pale blue blazer, pearls in place, smile tight. Andrew had his sleeves rolled like he wanted to seem approachable. Their voices rose and fell with phrases like revitalization and community betterment. It was a performance, one they'd rehearsed. I waited. When the board opened the floor for public comment, I stood up. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. I walked down the aisle, my boots clicking softly, folder in hand. By the time I reached the front, the room had gone quiet. The chairman looked uncertain. "You'd like to speak?" I nodded. "Yes, as a resident, and as majority stakeholder on Creason Avenue." Gasps. That word, majority, landed like a dropped glass. Catherine's expression didn't shift right away, but I saw the tension pull at her jaw. Andrew tilted his head, lips curling in disbelief. I opened my folder. "These are the deeds to 7 properties under Oak Haven Holdings, LLC," I said, placing the documents on the table one by one. "All within the impacted zoning area. That includes 2 rentals, the duplex on South End and the old church lot." Andrew chuckled, folding his arms. "You're doing all this out of spite? Really?" I turned to him, steady. "I'm doing this out of stewardship. You used my name to erase a community. I'm using it to protect one." Catherine stepped forward, voice even but tight. "Julia, this isn't the time for family disputes." "This isn't about family," I replied. "It's about facts." I lifted the final sheet, slid it across the table to the board. "I'm filing a motion to nullify the rezoning petition based on property majority opposition, and I'm placing protective covenants on the lots under my ownership. No forced evictions, no demolitions, no development that displaces residents." There was silence. No one moved at first, not even the board. Then, from the 3rd row, I heard the sound of hands slowly clapping. Miss Darlene. She stood as she clapped, her eyes glistening, face proud. Others followed, hesitant at first, then with purpose. The sound filled the hall. Catherine's smile faltered. Andrew looked like he wanted to say something clever, but nothing came out. When it quieted again, I gathered my papers, returned them to the folder. I didn't linger. I didn't need to. The point had been made, not with volume, but with weight. As I turned to leave, a man I didn't recognize stepped forward. He wore a flannel shirt, smelled faintly of sawdust. He pressed a folded petition into my hand. "They thought they spoke for us," he said. "You reminded us we still have a voice." I looked down at the paper, his handwriting jagged and precise. Outside, the wind had picked up. The porch light on the community hall flickered behind me as I stepped into the cold, the folder tucked back under my arm. They thought I was gone. They were wrong. Some truths slip in quietly. Others come folded in stamped envelopes, notarized and initialed on every page. Mine came with both. The church had been closed for over a decade before I bought it. Tonight it was full again. The pews creaked beneath winter coats and worn cardigans. Soft pendant lights swung slightly overhead, casting a gentle amber glow. Miss Darlene sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap like she was holding something sacred. The room smelled faintly of old hymnals and cinnamon tea. I stood near the front, a folding table set up where the pulpit used to be. On it, 3 neat stacks of documents. I didn't use a microphone. I didn't need one. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "Tonight isn't about blame. It's about clarity." From the back of the room, Catherine and Andrew entered together. She was in her usual mauve. He wore a blazer this time, though the collar was still open. They didn't sit, just stood to the side watching. I gestured to the first stack. "These are the original trust fund documents left to me by Margaret Monroe, my grandmother. You all knew her. She baked pies for bake sales, helped repaint the elementary fence, never missed a Sunday." I picked up the top sheet. "This fund was intended to support my education and housing. It totaled $187,000. A pause. The room stilled. "But instead," I continued, holding up another paper, "it was drained, redirected by Catherine Monroe into a personal account, then used to finance a wedding, a pool, and various luxury renovations." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman near the back muttered, "Lord have mercy." Catherine lifted her chin. "It was for the family," she said. "We did what we had to do." I turned toward her. "Family isn't something you spend. It's something you protect." The room murmured, soft and uncertain. I moved to the next stack. These are records tying Andrew Monroe to the Maple Glen redevelopment proposal, submitted under the firm East Rock Holdings, which he quietly founded last spring. Their plan? Evict 6 households, raise property taxes by 40%, demolish 2 historic homes. Andrew scoffed. This is a smear campaign. I ignored him. These, I said, tapping the third stack, are names. Real neighbors, at-risk seniors. One of them is Miss Darlene. Another is a veteran who's lived here since '78. They were never consulted. Then I reached for a sealed envelope, tore it carefully, and unfolded the letter inside. This is the original letter attached to the trust, I said, voice soft but even. From my grandmother. I read aloud. Julia, I don't have much in this world, but I want you to have choices. I want you to never need anyone's permission to stand on your own. Use this however you need. Just promise me you'll never let this family turn you into someone else. Silence. Real, heavy silence. The weight of it fell like snow, quiet but impossible to ignore. Behind me, 2 attorneys stepped forward. Without a word, they handed sealed packets to both Catherine and Andrew. Civil investigation, one whispered. Misappropriation and zoning fraud. Gasps turned to murmurs. I had no idea. She really did this? Poor Margaret. I looked out across the room, faces I hadn't seen in years, teachers, coaches, neighbors who once turned away when the Monroe name came up. They weren't looking away now. I didn't come back to shame anyone, I said finally. I came back to protect what they sold. More silence, then a few nods. Someone whispered, "Good for her." Catherine stepped forward, trembling slightly. Her voice cracked. "You think this makes you better?" I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "It just makes me honest." And for the first time since I was 19, I saw her blink, not in anger, but in something else. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of regret. I used to think closure meant forgiveness. That piece could only follow after words like, "I'm sorry," were offered and accepted. But I've learned that sometimes peace comes with freedom and the courage to let go of what you were never meant to carry. Spring returned to Maple Glen with its usual grace. Dogwoods bloomed pink and white along the sidewalks, and laughter echoed down the block from open windows and porches, busy with new life. The Monroe house, my childhood home, stood among them, no longer a museum of old wounds, but a place with doors wide open and music in the halls. The chalk art stretched across the walkway. Names, stars, swirling hearts. A small sign near the steps read, Julia Monroe Housing Trust, Community Archive and Art Space. It was nothing flashy, just honest. Inside, I walked slowly through the hallways, wood floors sanded and gleaming. Where portraits once hung, there were now bulletin boards filled with art from neighborhood kids, photos from restoration days, a timeline of Crescent Avenue history drawn in pastel. The old study held poetry nights now. My bedroom. It was a writing room. Sunlight poured through the skylight like a quiet blessing. Miss Darlene met me on the porch with a smile and a foil-covered dish. "Peach pie," she said, "and this." She handed me a small photograph, me at 9 years old, legs swinging from the porch swing, my dad sitting beside me with a newspaper folded on his knee. I had forgotten that day. But the swing was still here now, rebuilt with cedar and stronger rope. "Thank you," I said softly, more to the wind than anyone. Darlene nodded and returned to the kitchen, where a few volunteers were arranging folding chairs and slicing pie. A little boy tugged on my hand next. "Miss Julia, can you help me with the ribbon?" He held a pink satin strip, clutched tight in his fist. "Of course," I said, following him toward the oak tree in the yard. We tied it low, near the roots. "Why pink?" I asked. He shrugged. "It looks like the sky when the sun's almost gone." We stood in silence a while longer. Then my phone rang. The screen flashed. Catherine. I stepped away to the edge of the lot where the grass met sidewalk. "Hello?" I said. There was a pause on the other end, the kind that felt like more than just hesitation. Then, "You were stronger than we thought." Her voice was smaller. No pearls, no podium. "You didn't break me," I said. "You freed me." Neither of us said more. When the call ended, I walked back toward the house, stopping once at the porch steps. I bent down, ran my fingers along the freshly painted rail. Carved softly into the wood were the initials, JM. I hadn't noticed them before. I stood, exhaled slowly. Inside, volunteers gathered to open the day's first writing circle. 2 new tenants set up canvas on easels in the sunroom. Darlene poured tea and passed out plates. I handed the deed to the board chair earlier that morning. The Monroe house was no longer mine. It belonged to the neighborhood now. I didn't feel loss. I felt something steadier, like legacy. As I stepped outside, a girl whizzed past on a pink scooter, helmet slightly askew. She circled once, then paused at the curb. "Are you the lady who saved the houses?" she asked. I smiled. "Something like that." As I watched the little girl on her pink scooter ride off down Crescent Avenue, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not grief, not anger, just a quiet kind of peace. Sometimes healing doesn't look like winning. It looks like coming home and choosing to open the door for others, even when it was once slammed shut on you. In life, we don't always get the apology we deserve, but we can still build something lasting with truth, compassion, and time. If this story reminded you of your own neighborhood, your own porch light, or the people who helped you grow, feel free to share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear what you're holding on to and what you finally let go.